I'm Donna Vogel. I'm the director of the Professional Development Office for Johns Hopkins Medical Institutions. And I'm going to be speaking with you about interviewing, how to prepare for an interview, some do's and don'ts, and how to make it perhaps more pleasant, less stressful, and how to use that interview to get the advanced training or the job you want.
All right, good afternoon again, everybody. We'd like to start our fourth session on the job interview, so I'd like to invite back up Donna from the PDO. Oh, you know that?
I'm not being heroic and speaking without my slides. I don't have slides. Just like left it out. I hope you don't mind. There is a classic breakup line. It's such a classic, and it's actually now a cliche, which goes, it's not you, it's me. An interview is the opposite of breaking up, right? It's bringing you together. So it is not unreasonable to think that the classic line should be, it's not me, it's you. So I've given away my punchline. I'm going to come back to that at the end, but keep that in mind. It's not about me, it's about you. You don't get to my point in life without changing jobs a few times, and I have done so a few times. It's the norm these days, which means that I have been on a lot of interviews. I have conducted some interviews, so that's somewhat of my bona fides for standing up here and talking about interviews, but I usually preface my in-reach talks. When I come to you, I usually preface them by saying, if you've heard me talk about this subject before, I give you license to fall asleep or check your email or update Facebook. Nobody here has heard me give this talk before, so you all have to pay attention. I've heard a lot of people talk about interviewing. I've read a lot of articles about interviewing. But every time I hear somebody else talk about it, I always learn something. So I hope that even if you have heard some of this stuff before from elsewhere, that you will learn something today. I have relied upon some sources, and when I upload the complete version of my notes, you have an outline, but I have the more complete version of my notes, and I'm going to annotate that with the hyperlinks so that you'll see where the sources go to when that goes up on the website. But some of the sources I have relied upon are articles or webinars by Mark Cosentino, Robert Sternberg, Corey Ashworth, my colleague Paul Hutchinson from Public Health, and some of my own experiences, which I will probably scatter along the way, particularly in answer to your questions. I call this, congratulations, you've got an interview. And let's start with what that tells you. Okay, what it tells you is you've made it past the first barrier. The employer believes that you can do this job, that you're qualified, but he doesn't know yet if he wants you to do the job. Your CV or your resume will display your achievements, your accomplishments. That's what I've heard called your work ability. Actually, John Hill from LinkedIn calls it your work ability. And that's what gets you the interview, right? Your CV, your resume gets you the interview. You heard that this morning. Your interview displays your personal qualities, your likability, and that is what gets you the job. A lot of your success in an interview is going to be due to your advanced preparation. And probably the most important element of that is doing the homework on the organization at which you're interviewing. It could be a university, medical center, it could could be a company, a foundation, a nonprofit, whatever organization it is. And I may use company and organization interchangeably, but it means all of those things. You've got to research it. And specifically, you want to research its mission, its vision for the future, the work that it does, the goods or services it produces, the jobs that it does, its leaders, who's in charge, how long have they been there, where did they come from? Of course, its organizational structure, what the different parts are, and how they may interact. Its strengths and its challenges. Its history. Are there things that it is particularly proud of as an institution? And get a sense of the direction they're trying to move in. Because you want to sell them on how you can help get them there. You want to be on board with their vision, so know what drives them, and know how you can complement their existing assets to help them get to their goals. In addition to things they may be proud of, there may be some things that are hot button issues for them. So you want to be up on current events. Somebody mentioned that this morning too. Know what the issues are in that industry, what's changing, what's going on in the big picture that affects that company or that organization, and be prepared with ways that you're thinking about how you can help them with those issues. You want to be well aligned with their priorities. You want to be current. So that's knowing the organization. Next point is knowing yourself, and crafting a good CV and a resume is a great exercise in getting to know yourself. What do you bring to the table? Somebody asked this morning when I'm networking, how can I, as a student, have anything to offer? Well, you do if you think hard enough about it, because you all achieved something by being here. What are the traits that got you here? What are the traits that got you this far? What makes you stand out? Why are they going to want to hire you more than anybody else? If you identify the characteristics that form your personal brand, if you plan stories, and I'm going to come back to that, if you plan stories for the interview that really highlight your characteristics, you can weave those points, those traits, that brand, you can weave that into your answers, and that will help make you stand out. Your CV and your resume are fair game. They can ask you about anything that's in there. You heard that this morning from Amanda. So anticipate questions they might ask you about anything that's in those documents. Where might they have concerns? Did you put something in there that might raise a question? Prepare yourself with how you're going to address that. Always be honest, but try to put positive spin on it. It's perfectly fine to put yourself in the best possible light, and these are some of the things you have to think about beforehand. A question that often comes up, for example, is occasionally you apply for a job and there's a previous advisor that you don't ask for a recommendation because it's not going to be a good one. How do you deal with the fact that you've left somebody off your reference list? You want to deal with that in a way that does not reflect on your ability, that doesn't reflect on the quality of your work. You could frame it as that there were personal differences, events overtook the progress in the lab, but make sure that however you explain it does not reflect on you or the quality of your work. And it is okay to do that. Everybody knows that these days. Everybody knows that people are leaving people off their reference list. So you're not the only person in the whole world that ever happened to. And then there's some very prosaic preparations, particularly if you are traveling to an interview. Remember your photo ID. Bring enough cash. Know where you're going. Plan how you're going to get from the airport to the university. Just figure things out ahead of time so you don't get flustered, don't get lost. Okay, you're there. Let's talk about your first impression. I wish I knew where these numbers come from. They keep coming up, and I don't know where they come from, but people say, very unscientific, people say that 60% of your first impression is how you look, 30% of it is your behavior, and only 10% is what you actually say. Does anybody, my colleagues in career services, anybody have any idea where those numbers come from? I don't know. And by the way, I am not a career services professional. I'm an amateur. I'm a scientist like yourself. I ended up doing this, and it's, let me take a tangent. I give myself permission to sidestep a tangent. My frequent elevator speech line used to be, I was at NIH for 25 years before I came here, and sometimes that's all people need to know about me. I am a lapsed developmental biologist. My medical background is endocrinology. I went to NIH in 1980 to do a postdoc and ended up running a grant program. I ran a grant program at NIH for a long time. And along the way, I realized that the part of it I liked the most was working with fellowships and training grants and early career grants. So I realized that working with students and trainees and postdocs and early career people was the part I loved the best. And several zigzags later, I find myself here. A number of years ago, shortly after I came here, I've been here at Hopkins for 6 years, which still makes me relatively new. I gave a workshop. It was the first and probably only workshop I have ever given in an Irish bar. It was called, There's No Such Thing as Talking to Too Many People, or How I Got My Dream Job. And it was all about networking. I'm not going to talk about networking, but just know that where you end up may not be what you're thinking about right now. Things change. And I ran a grant program for a long time. Nobody ever wakes up in the morning and says, wow, I really want to be a grant administrator when I grow up. It happens to be a great career. So this is what I'm doing now, and it really is my dream job. I take 2 trains and a bus to get here every morning, and people think I'm crazy. Okay. End of tangent. That's apropos of I am not a career services professional, so I don't know where these numbers come from. But 60%, they say, comes from how you look. I didn't own a suit until I was 54. I own some now. You should probably own a suit. It's different now. When they say dress professionally, there are lots of different ways that you'll hear that said. Dress for success, dress half a notch more conservatively than the people that you're talking to, be guided by the culture, but still be half a notch more conservative than the people that you're talking to, even if it's Google. Paul Hutchinson has a wonderful slide where he's got 8 different websites that have links to guidelines for how women should dress for an interview, and for men it has suit, tie, clean shoes. So I don't know anything about fashion. I have no sense of style, but what I can tell you is don't wear things you've never worn before. Yes, you want it to be clean. Yes, you want it to be neat, but don't wear something brand new because you don't want to be in a situation where you can't get something buttoned and you didn't know that until you got there, especially if you're traveling. Jewelry, tattoos, piercings, keep it to a minimum. No visible tattoos, no visible piercings except the ears. You can always come out with them later after you've got the job. Minimal fragrance also. A lot of people are really annoyed by fragrances. And please, 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 wear comfortable shoes. You're going to have to walk around a lot. You're going to have to be giving talks, seminars, chalk talks, presentations, whatever it is. Please do not wear shoes in which you are uncomfortable walking and may fall down. Body language. This is a really big topic, and some of the links that I'm going to send you will say a lot more about this. But Use your body language to show attentiveness, to show interest. Sit forward, don't fidget, keep the physical tics to a minimum. Keep your hands at your sides, on your lap, on your stuff, but not like this. That sends a very defensive message. You don't want to sit like this. You want to be open and forthcoming. It's very much like when you give a talk. Have any of you been to any of our talks where we talk about scientific presentations and gesturing? Then I can use this. There's good gesturing and not so good gesturing. And you do want to use your hands, but you want to use moderation in using your hands. So no, don't clench your fists, keep your hands open and gesture from in to out so it gives that sense of openness. I actually talked with my hands a little too much. It was funny when they were taking my the video clip before, and I wasn't using my hands very much, and they said, you should use your hands more. I lived in an Italian neighborhood in the Bronx for 6 years. And my name is Donna, and my hair used to be black. And I passed for Italian for 6 years. So I really, picked this up, and I've got to kind of hold it down. But do gesture. Gesture is a good thing. And even if this is a phone interview, move your hands. Why? They can't see you. Because if you move your hands, it makes your voice modulate more. It keeps your voice from becoming a monotone. It makes your voice more interesting. Just does. Don't know why. Okay. How you act. Be on time. Better yet, be early. It sends a really bad message of disrespect to the interviewer and the organization if you're late. Bring what you need with you. What do you need? You need some copies, some hard copies of your resume or your CV. You need business cards. Everybody should have business cards made if you don't get some. The Postdoc Association, I know, can work that for you. I'm not sure about the students. If you don't have access to get them done through one of the campus organizations, just print some up in your basement. It's so much more professional. Just buy some cardstock and print them up, or you can get them from Vista Print for pretty cheap. It's much more professional than scribbling things on pieces of paper. What else do you need to bring? You need to bring your schedule with you so you know where you're going. Bring the names of the people who are interviewing you and bring their bios so that you can refresh yourself about where they're coming from, where they've been, what you have in common with them. I love opening a conversation with someone by sharing something we have in common. And LinkedIn is fantastic for this. You can find people that belong to the same group as you, who belong to the same professional society, who may have gone to your undergraduate college or be from your hometown. You never know. That's another great reason why you should join lots of groups. The more groups you join, the more people with whom you will have something in common. And they don't always have to be professional groups. They can be outside groups, interest groups, geographical groups. I belong to a group of people who got out of Buffalo. Really, there is a LinkedIn group for expatriate Buffalonians because we all got out. And very importantly, bring your list of the questions you're going to ask them. This is a key piece of your preparation. At the end of every interview, you will be asked, do you have any questions for us? And the worst possible thing you can say is no. Always have questions ready. And I would advise you to have at least half a dozen questions prepared based on your research that you've done about them. You're not going to have a chance to ask half a dozen questions, but some of them may have been answered in the course of the interview, so you want to have some that haven't been answered that you can ask and show that you understand the organization, you understand some of their challenges, some of their issues, some of their direction and vision. When I interviewed for this job at Hopkins, I had an interview with David Nichols, who was at that time the Associate Dean for, the Vice Dean for Education. He was the Vice Dean for Education at the School of Medicine. And I knew that they were developing a big new curriculum, Genes to Society, for the medical school. Well, I also knew that this wasn't something that would affect my daily life in the professional development office, but I knew it was something that was really important to him. So I asked him about Genes to Society. Ask questions about things that people will want to talk about. It will reflect well on you. They will think, oh, how perceptive that candidate was. Other aspects of how you behave. At least one other person this morning mentioned the firm handshake, right? No limp fish, no vice grip. You want your handshake to be firm, friendly, in that happy medium ground. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really contributes to the impression that you make. Eye contact may be difficult for some of you. There may be cultural barriers to making eye contact with people. You may have been brought up to think it's rude or invasive. But here in the job world in North America, you need to make eye contact. You need to not get all up in their grill, but you do need to make contact. Practice your warm smile. If you don't go around smiling, and I know not all of us do, work on it. Be pleasant. If you come in looking grumpy, that's going to convey that impression that you're not happy to be there. And you really want to convey the impression that you are happy to be there. I don't walk around with a smile on my face. My normal resting expression is kind of glum. And I've actually thought about carrying an affidavit from my father saying, she's always looked like this, it's okay. But you don't have to be like that. Because if you are giving the impression that this is a pleasant experience for you, even if it isn't, you need to put on the act that you are confident, that you are relaxed, and once you've been through it a few times, you actually will be confident and relaxed. It may not sound realistic, but with time it does. It really does happen. You get relaxed enough being out on the circuit that it's not a threatening, stressful experience anymore. If you're lucky enough that you got a job after only a few interviews instead of a lot, good on you. I'm happy for you. Control not only your physical tics, but also your verbal tics. Tune into whether you are throwing ums and ers and likes and you knows into your speech. Get somebody to listen to you or record yourself and be aware if those things are creeping into your conversations. And if they are, stop them. How do you stop them? I don't know why this works, but it seems to work. If you just pause for a fraction of a second, a microsecond, if you get to the point where you become aware of that, about to emerge from your mouth, you can get it before it comes out, and if you just pause for just half a beat, you'll be able to stop it. Don't know why, it works. If you are walking into a room where the interview, or perhaps it's a panel interview, there may be a group of people, are waiting for you, remain standing until they ask you to sit. It's just a little politeness, but it looks good for you. You're showing respect. When you are engaged in the conversation, practice active listening. Right? Who knows what active listening is? You react to what's being said to you. You nod, you smile, you occasionally will throw in a particle like, yes, I know, I understand, so that they know that you are paying attention. Active listening is a really important skill. Listening is not passive. Listening engages both of you, both you and the interviewer. You may want to restate or rephrase what they've asked you while you're formulating an answer. That's good. You want to try to mirror their energy level. If they're very calm and quiet, don't be agitated. If they're very energetic, try to up your energy level, because otherwise, if you're too calm and quiet, your impression will get lost in the background noise. So whenever you can, try to mirror their style. That's something that also comes with practice. And you may be able to work on that in mock interviewing with friends and colleagues or with your career services office. When you do speak, try to vary your tempo. I mentioned that earlier, apropos of gesturing. You want to vary the pitch and the tempo and the volume of your voice so that you're not just standing there talking in a monotone, because that's really boring and sounds really bad. But not too fast and not too slow. Somewhere in the middle, just right. And that will help you even in a phone interview. Because phone interviews are really challenging. You don't have the eye contact, right? You don't have the gesture, and you don't have the body language. All you've got is your voice. So you need to use your voice to be interesting and to show that you're interested, to show your enthusiasm, to show your confidence. And that's something that will take practice if you're not used to it. Phone interviews can be really deadly. Once I had a phone interview that I didn't even realize was an interview. It was terrible. I got a phone call from someone that I had gotten to through a connection, and I wasn't expecting him to be calling me. He called me at work and started asking me about what I thought I could offer his company. I wasn't expecting it. I was totally unprepared, and I didn't realize it was an interview, and I completely didn't know what to say. So I emailed him later with a whole lot of things that I would have liked to have said if I'd only thought about it. It didn't work. Never heard from him again. I have also been on a phone panel interview, which was really tough because I had to sort of note down what person had what kind of voice at the beginning when they all introduced themselves, so I could remind myself what the position and the interest was of the person who was talking. That was really hard. So phone interviews represent a whole separate set of challenges, and I have a document that I'll attach to my notes when I send that into the website about phone interview questions. All right, well, we're finally up to what do you say, which is the 10%. You do want to be prepared, but you don't want to be over-prepared. You don't want to be so overly prepared that you sound robotic, that you're just repeating back something that you've memorized. But I hear you cry. What if I am on an interview where I have to talk to half a dozen different people, and they're all going to ask me the same questions, one after the other, which is fairly typical, particularly on academic interviews. Frame your core responses. Organize your core responses to the questions you expect to get, and then think about how you could answer them in multiple different ways so that it doesn't sound repetitive when you answer the question. Just vary the style, vary the language a little bit when you get asked the same question multiple times. It will help you come across as more interested and more spontaneous. You need to show enthusiasm. You need to show that whatever it is that you're answering, you feel really positively about it. Particularly if you're changing directions, and I don't know how many of you that's going to apply to, but if you're sort of switching gears from one field to another, you need to be very positive about the field you're moving into. Show them that you really want to be doing what their company is doing, not what you did before, and why. And show how you're doing it. I'm taking some courses. and getting an online credential, because I'm really interested in moving from point A to point B, and this is how I'm doing it. This is how I'm tooling up to be the person that you want in this job. And really important, especially for those of you out there who may be extroverts, know when to stop talking. It is a sure sign of nervousness and lack of confidence if you just keep talking because you can't bring it to an end. So do that. Which is a segue into part 4, the actual questions and how you deal with them. And there's several kinds of questions, as we know now. And I've broken them down into the traditional or expected questions, the difficult or unexpected questions, and behavioral questions. So the traditional things will be, why are you interested in this job? Tell me about yourself. Let's start with tell me about yourself. Does that mean tell me about yourself? No, it doesn't. Another of the worst things you can do when someone says, tell me about yourself, is start recapping your CV. No, don't do that. Tell me about yourself really means, how can you, the candidate, help me, the organization? Tell me about what you bring to the table that will help us get where we want to go. So put yourself in the interviewer's shoes for that one and frame your response the way they want to hear it. Then, why are you interested in this job? That's a really important one. That should also reflect your homework. That should reflect the research that you've done about the organization, about their mission, about their vision, where they want to go, how they want to do it. You need to align your interests with the way that they operate and with the work that they do. So let them know that you're the person who will fill their needs. Let them know that you will be an asset to them through what you bring to their company. It's also a predictor of how you're going to think. And we're going to come back to that in a moment when we talk about the behavioral questions. But the why are you interested, the tell me about yourself questions, those are a window into your self-awareness. Remember when we talked earlier at the beginning about preparation, you need to know the organization, you need to know yourself. When you're able to talk about what you have to offer, that shows them that you have done the introspection, that you've learned about yourself, and you know what you do bring to the table. Then there's straightforward questions. There may be technical questions about what you know how to do, about what work you've done in the past, things related to items on your CV or on your resume, and those you can anticipate. Things related to your research, things related to your training. Oh, I see you took this course. I never ran across that in a candidate for this job before. Tell me, how do you think this coursework relates to this job? Be prepared for questions like that. But that'll come straight out of your paperwork, and you will familiarize yourself completely. And remember what you heard this morning, you never put anything in your CV or your resume that you're not willing to be asked about. So anticipate those questions. Now, difficult questions or unexpected questions. Maybe they ask you something that you didn't prepare for. Maybe they ask you something you really don't know much about. Don't fake it. Be honest, but put as positive as possible a spin on it. How do I mean? Well, say they ask about something that you haven't had any experience with. Admit it, but tell them how you plan to learn about it. And that's related to where are the gaps, where are the weaknesses. If you look at how well you align with what they're looking for, and you can see that there's something you don't have, come with a plan in mind for how you would acquire that knowledge. or how you would acquire that expertise. Sometimes they would ask you, what would a colleague say about you, and you can say good things, but sometimes they will ask you, what would a critic say about you? Think about that. How would you spin that positively? That's somewhat aligned to your weakness, and some of the same answers might cover that one. But they may ask you questions about facing a difficult challenge, or they may ask you questions about when did something not work for you? When did you face a situation where you were not successful? You don't want to talk about stories like that. But if you have to, if you're directly questioned on a difficult topic like that, pick something where you learned from the experience. Tell them what you learned and how you moved forward, how you would move forward if something like that came up again. They want to see your process. They don't really care about what happened, but they want to see your process of how you would move forward and add value in the future. Now, behavioral questions. We as scientists, and I would say particularly a crowd like this where we all tend to have two left brains, am I right? We're very analytical. This behavioral stuff is, what? You will face it. You will be asked these kind of questions. Why do they ask these kind of questions? Tell me about a time when you, whatever, or how did you deal with whatever situation? Again, they don't care what happened. They want to know your process because your past behavior is a window into your future behavior. And they are looking at you not only as a package of skills, they're looking at you as a future colleague. Do they want to be around a person who handles crises in this way, who handles stressful situations, deadlines in this way? So you want to show them in the best possible light that you're the kind of colleague that they want in their corner when they're facing a stressful situation. What kind of stories do you choose? You should choose a situation you handled well. That may seem self-evident, but you want to tell a story that has a happy ending when you can. Choose a situation that had a good outcome and have several of those ready to illustrate different kinds of points. So it might be, when did you have to overcome a challenge? When did you have to deal with changing situations? When did you have to bring together people who didn't agree? So assemble a variety of stories that you can have ready to answer those behavioral questions, ideally that have a happy ending. Remember, if they don't have a happy ending, tell how you learned from the experience and how you move forward to add value in the future. But don't get too bogged down in the details. They don't want to hear a whole long, anybody speak German, a whole long Geschichte? No, they don't want to hear that. What they care about is your analytical process, your thought process, your analysis, how you put the data together, how you came up with a path forward, how you came up with a process. What steps did you take, and how did you use your skills? And there are a variety of acronyms for these kinds of stepwise processes. There's STAR, there's PARS. They all have A and R in them, which is action and result. So keep that in mind. Any story you tell, what action did you take, what was the result? You can actually be prepared for most of the questions you're going to get. And that right there will help reduce the stress factor. You won't be relaxed. You won't feel happy to go in the room at the beginning. Eventually you will. But if you start by being honest, being sincere, and staying focused, you'll be well on your way. Remember to bring in not just your skill set, but the personal characteristics that you want to use to help get you the job. Now, I want to cover one list that I heard on a webinar a couple of weeks ago that I really liked. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on each of these, but I want you to know that it exists, and it's going to be on what I send in the full-length notes. This was a webinar that was given by Corey Ashworth, who does career services at Bryn Mawr College, which happens to be my undergraduate alma mater. Anybody here from Bryn Mawr? Anyway, she gave a webinar on skillful interviewing, and embedded in that was a list of 10 kinds of interview. And I thought it was a nice way to frame it, because she gave some do's and don'ts and some things to watch out for on these 10 different kinds of interview. It's a little artificial, because they're not all comparable. It's kind of an apples and oranges list, but it goes like this. 1, screening interview. Often by phone, sometimes just looking at your resume. That is to screen out the applicants they don't want. That's to shrink the pool. And it's usually a fairly standard format. If it is a live thing, if it is a phone thing, they'll ask you some standard questions and you'll be in or out simply based on your qualifications, on your credentials. So there you don't tell any stories, you don't give any new information, you just give straight up answers. Taped interview. I hadn't really run across any of those, but apparently it's something that's coming into use, where they have pre-recorded questions and you never actually make contact with an interviewer. You just get the questions and you get to frame your answers, even write them down, get your answers organized, and then you record them. I actually like that because you're not on the spot, you have lots of time to think about it. It's more like an open book test. Skype. Quiet room. Neutral background. You don't want confusing, busy visuals in the background. Make sure that your eyes are lined up with the camera, that the camera's not up or down. Indirect lighting. Don't do it in your pajamas. Dress like it's a real interview. Smile. Don't forget to smile. Committee interviewing, panel interview, group of people. Lots of companies like this because it saves them time. And in a way it helps you because you don't have that problem of worrying about giving consistent answers to the same 6 people, one after the other, or having to vary the story for each time you tell it. So it, in some ways, makes your life easier. I personally find them very intimidating. If I'm the only person interviewing and there's 6 or 8 of them. The key here is know what the interests are of the individuals on the panel. If you can find that out ahead of time, it's a big help. If not, you'll find it out on site, and you should quickly take some notes so you know who's interested in what aspect. Then when somebody asks you a question, yes, you address your answer to the person who asked, but never ignore the rest of the table. Always look around at the rest of the people at the table so that they know that you are including them in the information that you're giving. Even if you're answering the question from the perspective of the person who asked it, make sure the rest of them feel included. Skills interviewing. That's a straight, are you a match for the job? It's like the keywords that Al showed you a little while ago. And this is where those acronyms come in, with the A and the R in them. So that's where you tell your stories about how did you handle a certain situation. One of them is PARS, problem, action, result, skill. What skill did you use to solve that problem? Very similar to that is STAR, situation, task. A is for action, R is for result, right? Project a tone of confidence, but not arrogance. So you need to temper your confidence in your ability with just a little humility. And if they ask you something that's hard to deal with, you have one, count them, one chance to pause and gather your thoughts. You can say, give me a second, gather your thoughts, but don't do that more than once. You only get one chance to do that. The behavioral interview we talked about, that's where they're trying to predict your future behavior based on how you handled a situation in the past. So make sure you have several stories, several scenarios prepared. Typically, these would relate to leadership situations, collaborative situations, meeting challenges. Meals. You heard about that a little this morning too. Lunch, dinner, any kind of social event, it's business. You're still on. So be prepared to eat less than you want. Be prepared to drink less than you may want to, or none at all related to alcohol. And be aware that you're being tested. Be up on the current events that affect the organization. Know what's going on in the news, if it's a company, if it's a government agency, because that's the kind of small talk that would make it that real. And you need to show your awareness of where they're going, what the big picture is affecting them. You will be looked at with respect to your social skills and with respect to your emotional intelligence. Why? Why do they care about this stuff? Because if they hire you, you will be representing that organization to the outside at conferences with collaborators, with competitors, and they want to make sure that you put a good face on their organization. Case interviewing, I don't want to talk about that too much because I don't know that much about it, but that's used by consulting companies by and large. However, other kinds of organizations are beginning to slip that in to their interviewing strategy, where they will give you a case with certain challenges, things you have to develop, conditions you have to meet, and again, they don't really care about the answer so much as your thought process. They want to know how your brain works. So when they give you the question, if this is a live interview and it's not written down, write it down, take notes, ask questions, ask them to restate the problem, make sure you understand it, and then present your best problem-solving logic. Don't skip any steps. Even if you see the answer, don't go straight to the answer. Go through the steps to solve the problem so they can see what your process is. Pressure interviews. This is the cliche medical school interview where the interviewer does something really weird and waits to see how you respond to it. Just stay calm. That's all they want to know. They want to know that you can stay calm. And finally, interviews with senior management. This is where you're really very close. You may be one of the top 2 candidates. And at that stage, if you're meeting with a vice dean or somebody high up in the organization, that's your chance to get thoughtful responses back to the questions you really have. They already know your skills. You don't need to show them what's on your resume anymore. So they're more of a resource for you, and they may actually be wanting to pick your brain at this point. That has happened. That they'll ask you how you would deal with a situation they've got going on because they view you as a resource and they want to take advantage of what you know. When you are in that kind of a situation where they're asking you for your thoughts, don't get too comfortable because you're still being interviewed. So don't get too familiar, don't get too colloquial, don't show disrespect, and certainly don't talk too much. To wind it up, employers may say that they're looking for a particular skill set, but they're really looking at whether you're a good fit. And that's one of those real slippery concepts. That's one of these nail jello to a tree kind of concepts. What is a good fit anyway? You need to be tuned in to the organizational culture, which is a whole another subject. You need to know how decisions get made and by whom. You need to know what the style is of interaction. Are there a lot of meetings? Are there not a lot of meetings? Are they formal? Are they informal? How are you going to fit? If they ask you a question that reflects on your understanding of their working style, you don't want to give an answer that's the opposite of their working style. So make sure you understand. If they operate in a very informal way, you don't want to answer a question in a way that says, well, I think we should call a meeting and have everybody plan and bring their, so that kind of example. They want to know that you're genuinely interested. So don't pretend to be somebody you're not. Don't pretend to have interests that you don't. Because if you don't present yourself honestly the way you really are with what you really want, you may end up in a situation where you are not a good fit. You will be unhappy, the employer will be unhappy, and you probably won't be there for long. So be sincere. If you find the interview turning into more of a conversation, that's really a good sign. That means that they're getting more comfortable with you. If you come out of an interview feeling like, well, that was pretty good, but it wasn't really perfect, don't worry about it. There's no such thing as a perfect interview. It doesn't exist. So my bottom line is, it's not about you as much as it is about them. They're looking for the background and skills and competencies that they need to fill a hole packaged in a person that they want to have as a colleague. So figure out where their hole is and then show them that you are the perfect person to fill it. Questions? You should have questions prepared for the interviewer. Yes?
Like you said, after you normally if you ask you that you look at any questions, sometimes it's hard to ask some questions, especially if you know somebody more. So how come that? What kind of questions?
Well, the question was, sometimes it's hard to ask questions when you're in an unfamiliar situation and you don't know somebody. You feel uncomfortable, right, asking questions of this person who's interviewing. Number one, it's your job. They want you to ask questions. If you don't have questions, you're going to wipe out of that interview. So they expect you to have questions, don't be uncomfortable. Part of your job as a candidate is to ask questions. How do you find questions to ask? Look at what they're doing. Read their reports, look at their mission, look at their goals, look at the kind of people who are working there. And that will give you some clues. Like the example that I gave when I asked the vice dean about the medical school curriculum. I looked at what was going on at Hopkins School of Medicine and said, there's this new curriculum. I'll ask the vice dean about it. Worked pretty well. Look at the new hires, for example. Oh, I see you just hired somebody from this X company with Y expertise. How are you planning to put that into action? How are you planning to deploy that person's expertise? Where are you going to go with that? So be guided by their goals, because you want them to know that you can help them reach their goals. Does that help?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
I have a question. Like, I
days ago that I will give you the link to. And the idea is you don't say something that's really cliched or cheesy. You don't say something like, I'm a workaholic, I just work too much. You don't do that. And you also don't make up a fake flaw. A good strategy for that is to identify a real flaw, but one that is really non-essential to the job, so that it shows introspection, it shows you know yourself, but it doesn't really interfere with getting the work done. Okay? One of my flaws is I hate talking on the phone. I would rather get 10 emails than one phone call. It's just me. So if I were to answer a question like that, I'd say, well, I really don't like talking on the phone, and what that's done for me is it's made me realize that email does not have to be cold and impersonal, and I can carry on a conversation or an exchange of information just as well and just as personally by email as I could over the phone, for example. So pick a real flaw, pick something that you really know about yourself that doesn't undermine your ability to do the job. Does that help? Okay.
Give the amount of information that's necessary for them to see that you have developed something positive out of it. That's the main thing here. Anytime you say anything negative about yourself, whether it's an experience, whether it's identifying a weakness, find some way to turn it into a positive. Yes? You have an interview and you haven't heard back. Yeah, that happens all the time. Unfortunately, employers are not often as polite as applicants. What would you say? Wait a week or so before you follow up? Yeah, I wait about a week. I heard nothing.
Did you send them a thing?
Because you've already sent your thank you. You sent that right away. You sent that the day of or the next day at the latest. So, a week is reasonable. Yeah.
For behavioral questions, a lot of those seem to deal with teamwork and creativity. Like, tell me about a time where your leadership helped your
Yes.
team to overcome a challenge under time pressure. But as a grad student, I work by myself like 90% of the time, so I don't see this ever happening.
Okay.
How
So,
do you?
yeah, so the question is, if you get a behavioral question that has to do with leadership or working in a team, something that as a grad student you normally don't have experience with, because you work by yourself, you punch up over your computer, you work by yourself. My advice there, and this goes for other kinds of questions as well, is you may pull in something from outside of your student life, even from your past. You can pull in experience that you've gotten outside the workplace, outside of the classroom, it demonstrates what they're looking for. So if somebody else gave the example of being on a sports team, so that's a way to show leadership. Or an example that I like to give, if I got asked to show, if I were applying for a job that required expertise or knowledge in budget or finance, and I applied for jobs like that when I was in the government, when I was running the grant program. I needed to be able to show that I had budgets and finance. Well, I didn't have any formal training in that. I'm pretty good at it. I can do my own taxes. So I would bring in examples from my personal life. Like I would say that I had been the treasurer of the preschool, or that I was on the finance committee of the food co-op, just to demonstrate that you've got an interest and an affinity and an ability to be in a leadership position for an organization, even if it's outside your studies.
research or their research. That if you work with them, it might become an issue or not an issue. So how would you?
That actually may be an awkward place to be employed. If the department chair has a very strong bias, has a very strong opinion about a scientific matter, and imposes that viewpoint on the rest of the faculty in that department, and you come in with the opposite viewpoint, that may be an uncomfortable place for you. But if you were just talking about answering that question, what I would do, and I'll call on my colleagues if you have other thoughts on this, is I would couch that difference of opinion in the middle of your answer and bracket it on both sides with areas where you agree. Okay? There are differences of opinion in science. If we are honest about our work, there will be differences of opinion. And I'll come back to you for the second one, but let's give other people a chance. Yes?
Yeah, so sometimes when you're applying for jobs at consulting firms, like you may be asked to interview with other interviewees, so you form a small team and solve a problem. So how should we behave in that kind of situation?
When you're put in a group to work on a case, like a case for a consulting company, and they're interviewing the group as a whole, how do you deal with that situation? I honestly don't know. I've never faced that myself. If I had to improvise, I would say you want to be a good sport. You want to show collegiality. You want your group as a whole to succeed. At the same time, if it's a situation where they're going to hire one of you out of that group, go mostly with the likability factors. So I wouldn't try to stand out by being how smart or how competitive you are, because they know from your resume how skilled you are. So try to be the person they want. Try to show your good qualities as a human being so that they will hire you because they want you on their team. Other thoughts?
I think it's more a win-win situation if you can integrate whatever the team was discussing, because as a consultant, you will be confronted in working with very different teams. Every single case will have to resolve. And that's kind of why they put you in that situation. So how do you take other people's opinion and how do you come to consensus? So it's not how you interpret what was going on.
And
So you mentioned earlier when you said thank you, but that's usually relatively simple and easy when you interview with one or two people. So if you have a situation where you interview with multiple people and you're not able to get contact, what do you do?
I would ask the department administrator or whoever organized the panel to give you their contact information, and I would send individual notes to everyone. Absolutely. Your second question.
So it's a simple one. Just after your interview, how would you follow up with that interview so that it makes you stand out?
In your thank you note, you don't just say thank you. You tell them again how interested you are and how enthusiastic you are about wanting to become a member of their team and how much you're looking forward to their program.
So, with so much information on the internet, there's a lot of information available in some cases with a company, academic institution, or even the individuals you may be interviewing with. Can you give it some examples of questions that are right on the border between well-researched and creepy stalking?
Oh, interesting. Where do you draw the line between showing interest and getting a little too personal? Well, I don't know. I've got a link on my, I have a couple of URLs on my LinkedIn profile, and one of them goes to my Jeopardy games. And if you said to me, wow, you were on Jeopardy, tell me about that, there would be a
have like, thinking like something like, because I checked online, I think like, what case position before. Yeah, I don't know, like, for those kind of questions.
So you looked up where someone had been previously,
Right.
and you asked him about that, and he didn't like it.
Yeah, something like that.
He thought that was a little too invasive.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. To me, that would be fair game. If it's out there, if it's on your profile,
Right.
you should be able to ask him about that. How were you able to tell he didn't like it? What was it?
I have some feeling.
Okay. Okay.
So I would just suggest that you keep that to the company, right, with their strategic goals, where they've been, how they progress. I don't know that I would get into it on a personal level with the interview. So I think if you kept it a company call, like where are they going, what are their strategic plans, what are your thoughts, what's your thoughts? I think that's kind of where I would be at that. So you're careful not to step over the line of being too.
Okay, so err on the side of staying away from the first one, unless it's something